I made slides. I used to make slides all the time when I was in the military, as many of you know, and it was second nature to me, but now we had to use two different systems. I used one on the Apple and one on the PowerPoint, so I had to convert them and this, that, and the other. So I'm hoping my slides work. If not, we'll just go through the notes. One of the things that I wanted to talk a little bit about this morning just occurred to me during David's lesson this morning, and that's this idea of submission. You know, that's difficult for me sometimes. Now, as I've aged, I've become better at submitting, I think. It may have to do with my brain calcifying. I'm not sure. I may submit because I just don't have a good thought or something. But I do believe as I have matured in Jesus Christ and as just an older guy, that I'm willing to listen more to what someone else has to say. This is so very important to us in the church. You know, especially when we talk about leadership, I believe. We've got 8 shepherds right now, and none of us have got all the answers. In fact, many times we have very few answers. So it takes all of us. There was a certain politician years ago that said it takes a village, and I won't mention that person's name. I don't want to offend anybody. But it takes a village, and I think in the kind of the thought that David gets across today, it takes a church, it takes a family to move this church along. David Allen has many times mentioned the fact that the church is an organism, not an organization, and I think that's key to us as we talk and conclude our discussion today on leadership. This is not an organizational chart. We don't do that. Believe me, Frank in the police department, and I know we did in the Army, and many of the businesses and all the companies and stuff have got a top-down chart. It shows organization for the way that leadership should be and the way that leadership is in the organization. Well, that doesn't apply to us. So we look. Let's see if I can do this. What does that say? That's the wrong slide. Okay, John. Cut hot chips, she said. Oh, okay, let me go back. Is that where we started? Okay, yeah. Okay. So here's 2 questions we've got up here at the top that we'll kind of just talk about briefly. What qualities does the world consider in its leaders? This is discussion. Discussion. You're in business. You work for somebody. You've been in the military. You own a business. Huh? You were in USAA. They don't have any leadership model in USAA, do they?
Sometimes.
Sometimes they do, yeah. Other times they don't. Those of us in the military understand what the world's model is, Jim.
Experience.
Yeah. And generally, as you consider experience, the guys that are higher up have more experience. Either that or they just got there some other way. You know, so that's what we look at sometimes in an educational area or in a business area. You see that kind of leadership.
Ability to make a decision.
Ability to make a decision.
Not everybody has that ability. And you have management that can't make a decision, you're usually suffer. But usually you look for people who are leaders in the world who are not afraid to make the decision after listening to all the variables, but make the decision.
Yeah. By the way, I had Paul in class today so he could keep things lively. If y'all can hear some of the discussions that Paul Kling and I have had in the past, you'd think like that. Well, look, my last assignment in the Army, I was the head of a director. I had somewhere between 900 and 1,300 people working for me because we had a lot of seasonal employees. But you know what was kind of nice? Whatever I said is what they did. Now, I will admit that a few times I made a decision and we did it, and my boss, the chief of staff, said, that was a bad decision. So anyway, it's a completely different thing. You know, if we look at the church, and by the way, I'm going to show you another slide. Well, this slide right here kind of shows it. I think if you just look at the generational changes that we've had in the church, you've seen the, if you will, the model of leadership change. When I was a kid growing up, I was talking to, you know, when I was baptized at 12 years old. And I know that the eldership that we had in our congregation was more autocratic than maybe they should have been. You know, they said, here's the decision, the way we're going to do things, no discussion, this is the way we're going to do it. And that's not the way it is now, it's not the way it is with us. I'm going to talk about our ideal of leadership here in just a minute. But if you look at the fundamental qualities we consider leaders of church family, it's right upside down from what a normal business would do. We don't make decisions based on one person. Please don't do that. If you look over the last 6 or 8 months here at Northside, we've had several times that we've gotten together and we've asked different groups to make recommendations on the way we might do things. This is kind of the crux of the way we try to operate. We try to operate this way. And we don't walk into a meeting of our leadership branch, which includes the shepherds and the ministers, and we don't walk into a meeting and one person says, well, this is the way it's going to be. We do a lot of discussion back and forth. And sometimes it takes us maybe longer than what you might think it needs to take to make decisions. But we do try to make decisions based on a copious amount of prayer, consideration, asking for wisdom from Jesus Christ and God on how that decision should be made. We don't do things, make decisions lightly. Now let's see if I can do another slide here. Well, let me just talk about this for a minute. This is kind of interesting. The greatest generation now, my dad was in that generation. Actually, yeah, he was in that generation. He was an elder of the church for years and years. And I will tell you that my dad was could make a decision. And the elders made decisions. And we listened to what they had to say. I never will forget one Christmas, one of the elders, a friend of mine, it was near Christmas, and we were having a youth meeting back in our fellowship hall that had a partition drawn across where a kitchen might have been, because we didn't know if the kitchen was scriptural or not. Barry, you would have never played that our congregation. But one of the girls said, let's sing, and I forgot the song, but it was a Christmas carol, a faith-based Christmas music. You know what I'm talking about. And well, an elder was in there, and he stood up, and he said, we've got to talk about this before we sing this song, because there's no evidence that Christmas was when Jesus Christ was born, the 25th of December. So we all knew that. And I think, but she wants to sing Christmas carol. So we get this long lecture from the elder. This is the way our elders operate. We had an old gentleman who used to be a minister. He didn't believe that we should go bowling. Now, I mean, you can sing it anywhere, I guess, even in the bowling alley. But this guy happened to have preached up in the north, in the Detroit, Michigan area for a number of years. And Terry and I lived in the Detroit area for 3 years. And bowling alleys are different up in the north than they are here. I don't know how they are here now, because the bowling is long. But up in the north, it's all dim lights, and alcohol is served all over the place, mixed drinks, everything. So the atmosphere can get pretty rowdy in these places. Well, the bowling alley in my hometown was 2 lanes, lights on. They didn't serve any kind of alcohol beverage. And the worst thing you get there was Coca-Cola. So he didn't think we should go bowling. We should go to the pool hall and shoot pool. So we had a member of our church who was an entrepreneur, and he opened up a family billiard place. Lights on, nice tables. You come in, shoot food, but before you could come in there, you had to have your parents sign off on that. You know, they had a little grill there, served hamburgers, hot dogs, that kind of thing. My dad wouldn't sign off. I couldn't go in there. I mean, there's no alcohol, there's nothing. This is a wholesome place to go shoot pool. Well, in my dad's mind, the pool was the pool hall. So since he wouldn't sign off for me going into the family billiard place, I went to the downtown pool hall. There's a back alley back there, like you pull the car back in there and kind of hide it, and you not go in the back door, go in and shoot pool. But anyway, I guess the idea here, there's been a change in leadership, change in tradition, change that we do things over each time. Now, I mean, does anybody doubt that? See, we all understand that, see? We all understand that. Although some of us think that, you know, we did it back in 1958, 1955, it was done that way back in 1940. That's why we ordered to do it in 2022. Well, guess what? One of the things that you'll learn in Jack Reese's book, by the way, it's not just Jack Reese, there's several other authors like religious type material that say the church is going to die. If we continue the traditional model of church, where on Sunday morning we come and sit for an hour and we listen to a lesson and so forth and on, and then we get up and go to lunch, and then we go home, take our nap, or watch baseball, whatever it might be, that kind of model just doesn't get it now. We've got to think more, and we've been calling this missional. You've heard this mentioned so many times. And this is not an easy process to change our attitude from being more inwardly focused, although that's part of what we need to do. We need to take care of our brothers and sisters, but we also need to take care of those that are out there. So things have changed through this time frame. I came along right here in the baby boom. We're what ruined the United States, I guess, baby boom. Some people think. But anyway, you got X, Y, Z, and Alpha now. And, you know, I don't even know what some of these folks believe. We do know that they think differently than we do. So we've got to mold our church family, not around what the world wants to do. We have to mold it around what's right for us today. You know, if you just look at the way Christians were presented in the New Testament, and even in the Old Testament, I mean, even the way they dressed and things, you know, was completely different. So we've progressed over a number of years here, and we need to recognize that as we go along. All right. Paul writes about the character of a leader. I don't know if I can read this or not. 1 Timothy 3, 1 through 13. And this is some pretty typical things. These are characteristics of a leader, or sometimes we use the term qualities. And see, in times past, what we've done is we say, here's a list of the check marks that a person that's going to be considered for an elder's got to have by their name. So we don't really consider it that way. We're more concerned about the character of the man than we are his leadership capabilities or any of his background. Well, not even his business or whatever he might be doing. Anyway, Paul writes, here's a trustworthy saying. That's kind of key. Trustworthy saying. This is gospel. Trustworthy. This is something you can take to the bank, so to speak. Whoever aspires to be an overseer desires a noble task. So right there we see that the desire to be an overseer or an elder. I don't know why Tom wanted to be an elder, but I think I had a problem. I was ready to come in, sit around, and talk about what we need to do to progress, this, that, and the other. The first meeting I went to, as a new elder, as a new shepherd, there were two issues brought up. Instrumental music, engaged, and women in service. And I'm thinking after I got home, Lord, why did we have to do this right now? Do we have to do this today? Well, the result of that consideration, the prayer that went into that, the study and so forth that went into all of that, and I think it was right. I finally kind of came around. I actually went into the study with what I considered an open mind. I'm going to listen to what was said by the people that are doing the study, and then I'm going to make my mind up. So I think that's what we ought to do all things. We ought to do it that way. Okay. Here we said an elder or a shepherd should be, an overseer should be above reproach. We'll talk about this some more. Faithful to his wife, temperate, self-controlled, respectful, hospitable, able to teach. You may find out maybe I'm not able to teach today. So if that's the case, then write me off your list. Faithful to his, not given to drunkenness, not violent, but gentle, not quarrelsome, not a lover of money. He must, I can't read all that. Anyway, it goes on. We're going to talk about each one of those out of that list of things that Paul mentions there in that passage. Okay, here we go. Faithful to his wife. There's nothing that disturbs us more, and I mean all of us, than to see a family broken up. And many of us have had to suffer through that. And that's very disturbing. Temperate, even disposition, approachable. The man that's going to be a shepherd should be. And I'm looking at the crowd right here in this class this morning, and I think a lot of you are like this. These are qualities that we all should have, men and women, matter of fact. Self-control. Self-control. I know an ideal of being able to control yourself. I used to say with the military, and I think many of us did, that the discipline that we need to see in our soldiers, in our sailors, in our Marines, is one that there's no leadership available. They're going to do the right thing anyway because of the training that they've received. And I think that's the way we should be. We all know what's right and wrong. I dare say there's anybody in here that doesn't know right from wrong. There are things that are sinful, things that we shouldn't do. Sometimes, maybe when we're out by ourselves, we don't have any other brothers or sisters around. Well, you know what? I'm gonna kind of cheat a little bit. Well, that's not what we're talking about here. We talk about a person that's controlled whether or not he's around brothers and sisters or not. Out in the community, people view us as being in control. Respectable. And I think we get that from longevity, from being in the job. Now, as I've already alluded to, we're putting all of us up for your vote. That's not probably the right word. David wouldn't use that word. We're going to put all of us up for your consideration. 8 elders now, and if you feel like one of them, one of us, are not doing what we need to be doing as a shepherd, then you need to let that be known. But so we're all being considered. So on June or whatever it is, when we recognize those men in this congregation are shepherds, we will be recognized just like everybody else. It's all going to be the same. Not given to drunkenness. I testified on Wednesday night. Some of you, of course, weren't here, didn't hear that. But, I went through a period of time where I consumed a good amount of alcohol. And then, after I got to Northside, I said, well, I need to moderate that. Don't think it's anything that's going to be wrong with me having a glass of wine. One night we're sitting in a restaurant. I'm having a glass of wine. And one of our members walks in. And I'm like, maybe he won't see me. And he didn't. But I got to thinking, that's not the right attitude to have. I don't need to be doing this if I'm going to be trying to keep it from people. I need to be open and honest in my life. So I quit. Don't use it. And now that I've had a considerable number of medical problems, I think I've made a good choice. I'm not talking about alcohol, yea or nay. I'm talking about this. We don't want to do this. This is not the image that we want to be. Not violent and gentle, very gentle, not quarrelsome. Davis talked about, I think last week, about the elder up in Longview, and this guy just went on and on and on and on and on in every meeting. I'm against this, we can't do that, we can't do this, so forth, so on. And then he says, at the end of all that rage, well, maybe it'll be okay. Well, we don't want to do that. We don't do that as shepherds of this congregation. We've had some heated discussions, but there's never been a time when we left the meeting where we had loved one another and we haven't expressed it. I'm a lover of money. I do sometimes wonder how big to have a top of the line recreational vehicle. One that had a washing machine in it, and, all the comforts of home, big shower. But that's not my goal. My goal is to appreciate what I have now, to give back to the Lord and the church what I need to give back to. It's not a love of money. I'm not all consumed with making money. That's not my intent. Okay, we talked about this, I think, last week, Bruce did, where it says above reproach, verse 2 of chapter 3. As mentioned last week, this does not mean that the leader is to be perfect or absolutely blameless. Every one of us sin. There's not one of us in this room that's blameless. We're made sinless by the blood of Jesus Christ. It's just the flat out the way it is. It's the only way it is. There's nothing I can do. It's a gift given by God, the grace that He's shown us through His Son, Jesus Christ. An elder who is above reproach is one that does not give others a powerful reason to criticize him. And again, we don't necessarily want to keep criticism. If you do have a critique of an elder or a minister or anybody else who's teaching the class, the way to do that is to go to them and talk about it. Go to them and talk about it. So, any thoughts right now so far? Everybody wait. Good. All right, let's see here. Paul mentions three other elements that apply to an overseer's ability to lead. He must be able to teach, he must manage his own family well, and he must not be a recent convert. Well, I've heard all the discussions about congregations that try to apply a list of things men need to do to come to help. One of the ones that said, we talked about this, I think, last week, not in a lot of detail, where he says, must have believing children. And we went on to say that that means they need to be baptized believers. That's not what the verse said. It said they must be believing children. They must be children that are in subjection to their parents, to their father, and the father must not treat them badly. He must be able to teach. Anytime that we're called on to teach a class, we'll do it. And we have some of our shepherds that are better than others. There's two of them upstairs, and I'm sorry I'll miss that. Jim Martin and Dexter Freeman, they do an excellent job. And so we do have elders that are able to teach, and we should be able to. We accept the responsibility to teach. And one of the things that the question was asked was that, well, what's an elder do besides visit people in the hospital? Well, we're responsible for the spiritual well-being of this church family. We're responsible for leading this church family in the right way that's God's will. This is what we do. This is what we want to do, and that's one of the things that we hold dearly, is that we want to do that. Manage his own family well. Terry, if I beat you this week, I didn't kick her in bed or anything.
This week.
We've got to love our family. And, you know, Terry and I have been married for almost 45 years, I guess. And, you know, you got to work at it sometimes. And see, Bob and Janie are newlyweds, so they're still in the honeymoon phase. They don't have a problem. No, I'm just kidding. Married.
Just under the context of the eldest children, because there's maturity in that role, I'm of the mindset that those children that believe are older children. I can't see a 12-year-old or an infant, because an infant doesn't believe. Because when you go to talk to someone about their children who are non-believers, if they're not that example, what experience can be given? So I'm just of the mindset that when it talks about they have children who are under subjection or believe that those children are believers.
Believers in Jesus Christ. Believers how?
That they're members of the church.
Okay, so they're baptized believers.
Yes.
Okay. So, in my family's case, when I was baptized at 12 years old, well, my dad was an elder before that. He was an elder before I was baptized. So that's something that we can talk about. We may disagree on that, you know, but you still
Oh, I'm gonna do that anyway.
Very
Go ahead, Bob.
alternative view to that.
Okay.
Once our children become adults, they make their own decisions. It's how they treat it's their character that what we really need to look at more. Are they good character people? Because character comes from upbringing. They may mess up, they may do things wrong. They may not be part of the Church of Christ, but they have a faith. But they're this alpha group, okay? Or this Gen X or Gen Y. They don't think of church the way we think of church. My daughter lives in Shanghai. She has a Bible study every Tuesday. That's her church. And it's done through WeChat, not even in person. From one thing, there's government restrictions to meet, and other thing that's just the way the international world is. I have sons in Houston that don't go to a Church of Christ, but they make pies for their neighbors. They visit them when they're hurt, when they need help. They do things for people. It's not. You have to look at the character of the children, not where they baptize and go to a Church of Christ.
We'll go back to that slide I showed up there with the different generations. There's some different thoughts. By and large, most of us are in the older generation, so there may be not as much discussion about what Paul was talking about believing children and so forth, as there would be in one of the classes upstairs, especially the class Jim Martin's teaching, because there are a younger crowd of folks overall in that class. So, what do we do with that, Mary?
Well, I don't know what we do with that, but just in the order in which that's given, it said he must manage his own household well. So if his children are in his household, that doesn't apply to them. It said, and with dignity, keeping his children subjective, and in some version it says believers. So I believe it's the order. If the children are out of the home, that's not his household. And so if my son is currently on drugs in the streets of San Antonio, I'm not going up for eldership, but as a believer, he's doing things that are not conducive to my household. And so as an adult, he's chosen a way of life that's not conducive to me. So I believe that once it's stated, he must manage his household well, comma, with all dignity, keeping his children under subjection. So I think it's the order. If they're not in your household, just from my frame of thought and the way that that's written, that can't be a consideration of not doing. But it's that word believers that.
Well, I think you're right. I don't necessarily agree that a person's got to have children that are baptized believers. I believe the term that you just read there, this should be in subjection to the Father. I'll tell you, and many of you have, and I have every once in a while teaching the children's ministry. There are some children in that children's ministry over there, 6, 7, 8 years old, that are just as fluent in the Bible as I am. I mean, they go through the scriptures and they know where to find stuff, and they can find the scriptures without any help. I mean, there's really some kids that are learning the Bible. I think those kids are in subjection to their parents. Anyway, we may disagree with some of this. Yes, sir.
I just want to say, I really think what Paul said was right. I listened to everything that he said about his own children and such, and I think he's really very much on track. I will say this, there's a reason that an eldership, being an elder is not for a young man. And young is a semantic word. I mean, it could be, where do you consider young? But what I'm saying is, as you raise children, and I use the word children in plural because if you have more than one, you realize that you can raise them exactly the same, but they're individuals. And they have their own tendencies, and they will go their own way, and you can guide and coach them to do the things that you think that they should do, they won't always do that. They have to find out themselves, or sometimes it doesn't matter what you say or what life brings them. They're individuals. And so you don't really know that too much unless you're a father and you're raising them and you can see that. Again, they're raised with their brothers and sisters and they're all pretty much raised the same, but they don't all grow up exactly the same. Now I will say this, they will largely have the value system of their parents. That's why most kids grow up. But you will have sometimes children that go astray and it doesn't make sense. It just doesn't make sense. And you only know that if you've raised children yourself. And so as far as being an elder is concerned, raising children is kind of like on-the-job training. It kind of trains you a little bit about how to deal with people. And you deal with all kinds of disappointments with your own children and successes. And the same thing with a marriage. It's exactly the same way. I mean, it's a give and take, and it trains you to, if you're focused on Jesus and living like Jesus would want us to live, it just trains you that it's hard and it's difficult. Everybody is an individual. So, I mean, I think that's the experience that everybody in the room.
I think that's a good point, Dave. Maturity is not instantaneous, not a recent convert, I think is the whole point about what we're talking about here. Immediate rewards of maturity. Maturity is not instantaneous. It's not instantaneous. I said I was born at 48, and between 48 and 22, I've changed a lot. I've certainly become more mature to things that I would not do now that I would have done when I was 30 or 25 or something like that. I think maturity comes with age, but the maturity that we're really talking about is maturity in Christ or wisdom that only comes from God. We all know what wisdom is based on experience levels and so on and so on, because you get that in the private sector and business and all this other kind of stuff. Wherever you work, you become wise in the way of whatever's happening there. But we've got to pray for, practice, read, and study about wisdom from God, wisdom from Christ. I call it a process. I think it's a process as you grow. Not a novice, not a recent convert. And I think one other point that I will bring up about children is I think that, and I've talked to a couple of prospects already, and I've mentioned the fact that you've got to really consider your home and your children. Now, if you're like John, you've got 16 kids, various ages. He's got children, 4 children of different ages and different stages of life. It might be something John doesn't want to try to take on right now. I have no doubt in my mind that John Hodges will make a fine elder. He will be an elder at some point, in my opinion. But it's his decision, if he wants to be considered or not. But he's got to consider his family. It's like all of us do. We have to consider our families, where our children are, and how much parenting they need, and so forth and so on. All right, let's see where we are here. The elder must not be a newcomer to the faith. Obviously, we just said that. Our culture is not like that. Our culture is involved in everything being quick, quick food. You can do banking at home with your phone. There's all kinds of things that we do now that we get used to that's fast in nature. In spirituality, as in every endeavor, people are tested and refined through the fires of experience, and church leaders especially need to have passed through that fire. I believe if we went back and looked at that slide where it has the different generations, we could probably pick out a generation here of men that we have in this church family that might well be make very good elders, younger men. You know, our shepherds have aged in place, so to speak. I've gone from being 60 something to being in my mid-70s now, so, we're aging. So, when we look at age and maturity, home life, and children, that all has to be taken into consideration as we consider our new shepherds. All right.
Eric,
Yes, go ahead, Laura.
when Tom and I got married, we were like children raising children. We got married really young, and I can only imagine in Jesus' time how much even younger parents were. I mean, they got married when they were like 13, 14 years old. So children raising children was pretty much the norm. So when you talk about age of a person based on what age children he's got, that has really changed over the years. We've got people now who aren't having kids until they're in the 40s, some of them, So there may be a solidly spiritually mature man who's got young children at home. Is that the basis that we're going to judge that on? Number one, I don't believe this is a set of rules that we have to follow, but you have to look at the differences in today's culture as compared to what was going on when this was written too.
Yeah.
Laura, I'm so glad you brought that up. I wanted to say that, but I don't want to be the young person and no, I'm not going for an eldership. But I really think that applies. That you were 30. I mean, life expectancies back then were in your 50s. You could be a man in his 30s. I mean, elder, kind of the root word is like has a beard. You know what I'm saying? That can be late 20s, early 30s. So I don't know how to wrestle the context of our culture now, but I do think that if we went back in time, you would see elders that are very young by our modern terms.
No, I think so. I agree with that. We've got a couple of things here that I think we have to consider when we talk about becoming a shepherd. And I think it goes back to that desire a person might have to become an elder. God, if I got 2 or 3 or 4 children at home and they're all under the age of 10 or 12, I may want to consider it. If I really want to devote the time and the effort that I'm going to have to devote, we're asking for a commitment, folks. This is not something that, like David said, we're not electing somebody that can just say, well, this guy's a pretty good guy. He ought to be considered. So I think it has to be a discussion. A couple of the prospective people that have talked to me have asked questions. We've had 1 or 2 that's asked questions of all the shepherds on the Northside. Many of you don't know who John Hollingsworth was. He's passed away now. Before I became a shepherd, I spent a couple of hours with John Hollingsworth. Very fine man. Very fine. I could have just as easily talked to Presley or Andy. But I talked to John for a couple of hours. We talked about the days and days and the pros and cons. And, there's some time considerations also. You're still working 8 hours a day, 40 hours a week, 60 hours a week, whatever it might be. If you want to add a couple of meetings during the week, whether they're on Zoom or whether they actually physical meetings, there's going to be a time constraint. I think we've talked about this. Overseer's families, managing his own family well, see his children obey him, and he must do it in a manner worthy of full respect. If anyone does not know how to manage his own family, how can he manage God's church? Good point. I mean, the church is based on kind of a family structure, as it is anyway. It's one of the things I love about Jim Martin, when he became a shepherd. He always refers to the church as the family, the Northside family. And I've tried to pick up on that myself, refer to us as a family. And we have the same pros and cons and the disagreements and the discussions and so forth that you'd have within a family. And we still think that unity and love is the way that we overcome some of these disagreements. somebody wanna know what we do, how we do it. These are different models. I'm not gonna talk about these. The corporate model, I think, is obvious. We're not gonna use that as shepherds at Northside. We're not gonna do that. Democratic method of leadership, we're gonna have a discussion. And we're gonna discuss the way we should go, or the things that we should do, and then we're gonna make a decision. And that decision generally is pretty much all of us making the same conclusion. So I put down, Bruce didn't have this in his notes, I put down the shepherding model. That's a model I think we want to be. We want to be a shepherding model. I want to be concerned about every member of this church family as a shepherd. Jason's not in, Jason Kelly's not in. Meredith, Meredith is having a terrible time. So I said, I prayed with Jason this morning. Jason wants to come over and pray with Meredith. Meredith is at home. She can't see out of one eye. She's got diabetes. I'm concerned about Meredith, as is Jason's family. So, and we've known this for some time. Last year we visited with them, and, she was still dealing with the same thing. Wonderful, wonderful Christian lady, wonderful Christian family. Their kids are just fine kids. But we want to show concern for them. And that's what I call part of being the shepherd model. I would like to see us pray more. Now, somebody said something, I think David, somebody said something about prayer this morning. And we do pray a lot. I've always liked to pray before services on Sunday morning. Pray for David Allison. Bruce is going to speak. I double pray for him. We love Bruce up there. I love Bruce up there. He's a wonderful man. Bruce and his wife's down in Florida now, fighting alligators. Anyway, I would like to see us come into the auditorium on Sunday morning, and there's groups all over the auditorium praying with one another. Praying with one another. I could stop next to Paul Kling and Jesse this morning and pray for that new grandbaby and great grandbaby.
Grandkids.
Huh?
Yes.
Yeah. I mean, what a beautiful, beautiful young lady she is. And Paul's not going to be worth a hoot after she gets a little older. But think about praying with one another. I'm amazed that Tom and I have to pray for one another sometimes on Sunday morning. The others are back here, we're in an atrium. Where do I need to stand? You got something going on in your life, and you need some prayer, so you need to let us know. We'll pray with you. We'll either do it here, we'll do it in the prayer room, we'll come to your house, we'll do it day or night, whenever. If you wake me up after 9 o'clock in the evening, I'll come over then. But we need to pray and be a praying people. We need to pray for this church and our members, and we need to pray for us becoming more missional in our approach. And all these things are what I call part of the shepherding model. So we're looking for quality. We're looking for characteristics, I should say, of individuals that are more concerned about shepherding and not just praying, but concerned about the spiritual growth of the congregation. Gene Vance got me off on the study of the Spirit. Study of the Spirit. And I pray always that I'm infused by the Spirit. I pray for the Spirit to strengthen me today. Tom prayed for the Spirit before our class began. We want the Spirit to live wholly and fully in this family group. We pray for that, Mary.
I just want to go back to the word believer.
Okay.
The accompanying scripture in Titus 1, 5 through 9, and specifically in 6, it says that, if any be blameless, the husband of one wife, having faithful children, not accused of riot or unruly. So when it says faithful, the word faithful in the Bible is never associated with a non-believer. Satan was a believer, and he trembled, but we know that he's not a faithful member of the body. We know that it's not children who aren't active or maybe of age, because rioting and unruly. So I think that even though in the 2,000 years ago, when Mary was married, or girls were married at the age of menstrual cycle, that's not something that in the 20th century is going on. I believe that, yes, the concept of marriage may be the same, but the time and place and the age of girls, because society frowns upon, even now in third world countries, when 40-year-old men are marrying 13-year-old girls. They're forced into it. So that's not something that should even be considered, because we have laws against that on the sense of those faithful, believing children. A 12-year-old, not rioting and unruly. A 12-year-old is going to be unruly. I believe this is in the realm of every time you turn the TV on and read the newspaper, you see their kids. In rioting in the sense of just unruly and being, so I think that yes, marriage is honorable unto all, and the bed is undefiled, and all of that, but when it talks about those children and that man, that brother who is wanting to desire to be an elder, as you stated, his whole family is under consideration. You don't hold a 12-year-old under the consideration of, if they're not a member, of rioting and unruly and faithfulness. So that's my take on the scripture.
I might disagree on part of that. The fact that faithfulness is not necessarily just a Christian. I think before Jesus Christ died, they were faithful men. Moses was in heaven. Elijah was in heaven.
But they were before Christ died.
Well, yeah, but they were faithful men. You said whatever. So
They were faithful to God,
they were faithful to God.
which is what Mary's talking about.
So we may disagree on the point of believing children or faithful children. Because I think we can read faithful children in kind of the context of what Paul was talking about. I know Paul's kids. They're fine young people. They're fine young people. And I believe they're Christians. But they may not believe in the same way that I believe now, where they go to church, or when they go to church, or something like that. Similar to what he mentioned to Stacy in her circumstances in China. I don't know. Okay, any other comments about that? Let me just say this. Of course, we got to continue the gospel, continue our study of the gospel and teaching. Love and unity. Something that was kind of interesting. 4 or 5 years ago, I saw a class upstairs, and you may have been in it, and we were talking about unity. Unity. And for some reason over the years, we've decided that unity means we agree on everything. So anyway, I said, I want to talk about the unity, and that we should love and consider each other. We should submit to one another. And some person raised their hand and said, yeah, every time the elders start talking about unity, that wants something. Well, that's what we want, is unity in Christ. Regardless of who you are, where you came from, or whatever your status is, we want to be unified in Jesus Christ. Our focus needs to be on Jesus Christ. What are we told? We're told to love God, keep His commandments, love one another, love our neighbors. This is what we should focus on, I do believe. So anyway, then as we finish, we're looking for men of character, accepting the task of being stewards of the gospel, men that will inspire and guide, seeking to grow, serve, love, give, and worship together. In the last 4 or 5 years, I've grown considerably, I believe, in my own eyes. Some of you may disagree with that, but I believe I have. Because I've devoted myself to Scripture. I have Scripture in my life every day. I study every day. I pray all the time. I pray sometimes when we're driving to church. We're driving home. And I pray sometimes when I'm by myself. But we will conclude with our vision statement. By the way, it didn't take us how long to get this vision statement? We took about 2 years or 3 years.
Yes.
Yeah, it took a while. It took a while because we had 8, and at times more than that, talking about this. We're disciples. We are disciples. So, what?
2, probably.
We are disciples of Jesus Christ, growing in His likeness, reflecting God's love and generous service to others, embracing God's diverse creation, which we embody in joyful worship. Okay, we're a little past time, so is there any other comments anybody would like to make? By the way, the one thing I do want to say that I haven't talked to Dexter. Dexter made it, not Dexter, but Rod made the statement this morning. Submit your choices over Facebook, he said. I thought, don't do that. Did he say Facebook?
It's in the app.
Okay, so that should be your submission to, you should do 2 things. You should talk to an individual, make sure they desire to become a shepherd. And then when you submit their names, submit them through email or some private name written down. We got some forms out there. So, any other questions? Okay, God bless every one of you, and we'll see y'all next week.